every time Syria's new administration gets real close to achieving civil peace, gets real close to bringing all of the Syrian community fabrics together, Israel come in and makes everything complicated.
Real risk is that southern Syria turns into another Gaza now, like South Lebanon or like West Bank, a theater for proxy fights for Israel.
You are listening to In the Newsroom, a TRT Global podcast production. My name is Ezgi, and in this show, I take you around our newsroom as I chat with my colleagues and go beyond the headlines. While Israel's war in Gaza continues to rage, Tel Aviv seems to have set its eyes on a new target: Syria. This week, Israel launched a series of intense airstrikes on the Syrian capital, Damascus, while also hitting government sites in the south. The airstrikes blew up parts of Syria's defense ministry, hit near the presidential palace, and killed and wounded several people. To understand why Israel is attacking Syria, I speak to Syrian journalist Nour, our correspondent who is currently on the ground in Syria. And here in the studio, we have Fatih Semsettin, a senior news producer at TRT World. He has been studying and conducting research on Israeli foreign policy for more than 12 years. Together, Nour and Fatih give us the two vantage points we need: what's happening now and why it's happening at all. Let's begin. Since the ouster of Bashar al-Assad's regime in December 2024, Israel has repeatedly struck Syria. But what makes this week's attacks different? Nour, paint the picture for us.
Well, what makes this attack really unique and significant is that they have targeted for the first time the Ministry of Defense HQ with 3 different missiles, resulting in massive damage. And also we've been hearing from reports that they have also targeted several Syrian army personnel, such as the leader of the artillery division in the 40th battalion, the leader of the elite forces in Daraa, and several army unknown personnel.
The Israeli attacks are blatant violations of the sovereignty of Syria. But Israel claims the purpose of these strikes is to protect a minority community in the south called the Druze. You see, in the days leading up to the Israeli airstrikes, this small community was clashing with tribes in a southern Syrian city called Sueda. In response, the Syrian military sent troops into the area to stop the violence, but fighting only intensified, and it is reported that more than 250 people were killed. But who exactly are the Druze at the heart of these clashes, and what kickstarted tensions with them and local tribes in the first place?
The Druze are among one of the Muslim sects in Syria. They are among different groups of Islam, such as Sunnis and Shias. And the Bedouins are among the tribes of different parts of the countries. Now, what led to these escalations? From what we've come to understand from our sources on the ground and from different reports, that it all began with mutual kidnapping incidents between the Bedouins and the Druze. Some of the Druze kidnapped some of the Bedouins and vice versa. And that led to the escalations that we have seen in the past days. Now, what led to this kidnapping is the mutual roadblocks from Bedouins and from the Druze, as they live somehow close to each other.
But the Druze are not united in their stance against the Bedouins. In fact, they have continuous infighting between different spiritual leaders. A key figure in the midst of all of this is Hikmet al-Hijri, one of the prominent Druze spiritual leaders in Sueda. Hikmet al-Hijri has close ties with Israel and wants the Druze to establish autonomy in Syria. But other Druze leaders, such as Layth al-Balus, disagree with his vision.
Now, the two sides have been in continuous rivalry ever since the rule of the Assad regime, because Hikmet al-Hijri greatly supported the Assad, greatly supported the spread of Assad's forces in Suwaida, and also he was basically Assad's man in Suwaida. Layth al-Balus was against Assad's regime, and he supported its ousting, and he also was supportive to the Syrian new government, and he was one of these spiritual leaders who greatly contributed in enforcing the first ceasefire that took place 24 hours after the escalations. Now, what Faisal Bal'ous is saying that he refuses any attempts from Israeli forces to interfere in Syria. He clearly stated that we don't need protection from Israel. There's nothing to be protected from, and the new Syrian government has pledged to protect not only the Druze community, but also Syrians, all Syrians alike.
So, why is Israel so invested in this minority population in the first place? What's in it for them?
The key word is Muwaffaq Tarif. He is the prominent Druze spiritual leader in Israel, and he is great supportive to Netanyahu's government and Netanyahu's cabinet. And also, a lot of Druze community are participating in and serving in the Israelis army. So, any move from Netanyahu to upset, if it's right to say, to upset Muwaffaq Tarif will have its effects on his role, on Netanyahu's role, that the government might actually lose the support of Muwaffaq Tarif, and that actually what pushed Israel to interfere in Syria and strike multiple locations of the Syrian military.
A ceasefire was agreed upon between the Druze and local tribes in Swaida, according to the Syrian president Ahmed al-Shara. In a recent speech, he even referred to the Druze as brothers and sisters.
Today, as we face this challenge, we find ourselves in the heart of a battle aimed at preserving the unity of our nation. The Israeli entity, known for its repeated attempts to destabilize us and sow division, once again seeks to turn our land into a battlefield of chaos and to dismantle the fabric of our people. We have therefore decided to entrust certain local factions and the Druze spiritual leadership with the responsibility of maintaining security in Swaida. We are committed to holding accountable those who wronged our Druze brothers and sisters. They are under the protection of the state, and it is through law and justice.
Following this, the Syrian military pulled back its troops from the area and left security control to the Druze. But have clashes actually halted in Swaida?
The ceasefire has been breached several times by the Hikmat al-Hajari armed militias, as it was enforced two times previously. One that was agreed upon with Layth al-Bal'ous and Yusuf al-Jarbu'. These two are prominent spiritual Druze leaders. And after the ceasefire agreement, the Ministry of Defense Forces immediately have withdrawn from the city and giving the city to the internal security forces to establish civil police, to establish traffic police, and all of these details. The Syrian government, the Syrian people have been working on establishing ties between different parts of the Syrian community, and that's what Syria's new administration has been working since they took over the country. They acknowledge that the past 14 years have had their toll on the Syrian community fabric, and they wanted to bring all Syrians perspectives together. However, there are still groups of the Hikmat al-Hajari who keep on refusing calls from the Syrian administration, from the Syrian community to talk, to increase dialogue between the two parties. They keep on refusing, as they keep on coordinating with the Israeli forces to achieve their autonomous goal to have their own independent state within a state project. And what makes everything complicated, every time Syria's new administration gets real close to achieving civil peace, gets real close to bringing all of the Syrian community fabrics together, Israel come in and makes everything complicated. So we are still waiting for further updates as we are covering from the heart of Damascus.
While Nour's reporting lays bare the immediate consequences of Israel's strikes on the ground, it also raises a much larger question. Why now? To further understand Israel's long game and why the Druze matter so much to its geopolitical strategy, we now turn to Fatih in the studio. He says these latest attacks mark a deliberate strategic shift.
Israel has long history of engaging with regional minorities, not necessarily out of solidarity, we can say, but for the actually strategic interests. In history, we know that during the civil war in Lebanon, they supported phalangists, which led the massacre in Sabra and Shatila in 1982. Or we know that Israel has been active supporter in the Kurds in northern Iraq. They have been regarded as an ally uh, since like 1940s, 1950s. But this has been like a policy that Israel has conducted for years since the uprisings began in Syria in 2011. Israel has been side of the conflict in cooperation with Russia, and they targeted Iranian convoys or like Hezbollah convoys in Syria. But this time you see Israel wants to actually expand its influence by not just becoming a side of what's happening in Syria, but also being an actor directly stepping on the ground. So it seems to me like it's a strategic shift for Israeli foreign policy in Syria and also strategic interests. But now also we can see that it poses a threat to the regional stability.
The Israeli airstrikes come at a time when the US and Europe have lifted sanctions on Syria, and Damascus is finally trying to resume trade and finance with other countries after years of seclusion. So will these attacks impact this normalization process?
I would say like we should look at one of the first statements of Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar. Whenever like he was appointed, he made a statement that it was around like the revolution in Syria. He was saying that like a federal Syria is the best option for them. A federal Syria means like a Druze population and the Kurdish population in the north should gain some sort of autonomy or independence and from the Syrian authority. So this I think like summarizes how Israel actually is looking at Syria right now. By investigating Druze, not just Druze, but even like the armed factions in northern Syria, which is now like on the way of normalization with Syrian government. By investing these minority groups, Israel is aiming to fragment Syria, which is on the way of like protecting its territorial integrity. A stable Syria, like who could be relieved by the with the sanctions removed, and who could complete giving the rights of like the minority groups as they deserve, and unifying its population around Syrian identity. Such Syria would be not eligible for Israel to maintain its interests and occupational aims, because like we know that like Israel has been an occupying power in Golan Heights since like 1967, the Arab-Israeli War. And it wants to maintain, even like go deeper, as we have seen in the right after the revolution.
Fatih brings up the Golan Heights, a strategic plateau in southwestern Syria that Israel illegally annexed. The Druze community are the majority Syrian population in this area. Despite this, Israel has shown little hesitation in launching military strikes in or near the Druze-populated areas, especially when targeting what it claims are Hezbollah or Iranian-linked forces in the past.
We have seen in the right after the revolution, Israel like has just established outposts in the occupied area, and it wants to maintain, maybe directly by directly setting like stepping on the ground, or with a buffer zone led by the Druze. Like it's time will tell, but Israel definitely wants a fragmented Syria rather than a unified and territorially integrated Syria.
What has the international reaction been to the escalation?
So far, the international reaction has been very critical of Israel. I would say like starting from, of course, like Ankara, which has been very like very active since the revolution in Syria. Of course, like not just Turkey, but even some countries, some Arab countries who were reportedly on the way of normalizing relations with Israel, they even like criticized what Israel has done to like Syrian capital.
Because the US and Europe are currently so invested in building up this new Syria, they're lifting sanctions, they're having these conversations. Therefore, their response to Israel's attacks in Syria was arguably harsher than their responses to Israel's attacks in Gaza that we've seen.
Yeah, you understood correctly, because like there's an obvious reason. We're talking about a conflict which has like endured for 14 years, and ended up with a revolution. But of course, like with a huge price. Millions of people have been killed, and some other millions have been like dispersed, like and spread over the world. Europe and like EU, of course, has been like deeply affected with this. What happens in Gaza does not directly influence, EU's, policy, EU's like political spectrum or EU's politicians, because what happened in Syria actually led to the question of like refugee issue. But in Gaza, EU is not, EU is not just, taking care of the question like it did in Syria, because basically what happens in Gaza, unfortunately, stays in Gaza.
This is obviously a developing story, but what can we expect moving forward? Is Israel going to continue to deepen its involvement in Syria? And if it is, what does that mean for Syria's stability?
Israel seems like prepared to stay involved, like possibly even like escalating the tensions there. You see like public threats against like figures like Ahmet Ashara suggest, a move that like not just a conventional warfare, but rather a targeted assassination or like targeted, strikes might take place. What we see, like what we saw in Iran regarding like Ismail Haniyeh, like former political bureau chief of Hamas, or like what happened in Lebanon regarding Hezbollah's top echelon. So not just like strikes on infrastructure, but targeted, selective, targeting might be the option for Israel after this strike. There's also like increasing activity regarding like the Israeli land forces, as we have seen like the background of like the current chief of staff of Israeli army, Eyal Zamir, who's coming from like a armored corps background, and a reformer of like Israeli army trying to recalibrate the importance of land forces inside the Israeli army rather than just like depending on air forces. So that doesn't necessarily mean a ground invasion is imminent, like unlike, of course, like apart from what happened in Golan Heights. But it shows like Israel is actually thinking beyond like air power. But the real risk is that southern Syria turns into another Gaza now, or like South Lebanon or like West Bank, a theater for like proxy fights for Israel, cross-border raids, like as we see like Israeli Druze just like crossed the border in Syria and like acted on the behalf of like Israeli operations. And if that happens, the fragile calm in the region and in Syria could quickly unravel.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I thank you, Ezgi.
As we've heard today, Israel's recent strikes on Syria aren't likely just about protecting one community or responding to tribal clashes. They're part of a broader play to reshape Syria's future. By backing fragmentation, Tel Aviv ensures a weaker, divided neighbor, one less able to reclaim occupied territory like the Golan Heights or fully re-enter the regional fold. But that strategy comes with risks. Nour's reporting shows us how easily fragile ceasefires can fall apart. And Fatih warns of a southern Syria that could spiral into the next Gaza or South Lebanon. With sanctions lifting and diplomatic doors just starting to open for Damascus, the stakes are high. Whether Syria can hold together or whether outside powers will pull it further apart is a question that will reshape the region for years to come. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Ezgi Topar, and this was In the Newsroom. This was a TRT Global podcast production. This episode for In the Newsroom was produced by me, Ezgi Topar, and was edited by Nasrullah Yilmaz. Supervising editor, Burak Bayram. Executive producer, Nasra Umar Buhwana. Our production team also includes Khalid Selim, Mujtaba Shamil Ölmaz, and Afsal Ahmed. You can also download the TRT Global app for the latest news, updates, videos, and podcasts. Thanks for listening.